Hi, I'm Trime, and today I wanted to show you guys one of the first builds I ever played on Last Epoch a couple of years ago. It's the Static Storm Mage build. Focuses on using Static Orb as your main source of damage. It also has single target in Lightning Blast. It has a teleport skill in Focus, a defensive skill in Flame Ward, and a passive skill in Static. This build altogether has really good AoE, very good clear speed when running through echoes. It does high damage. It only requires one unique to really get the full use out of this build, and that's Twisted Heart, which is kind of a difficult unique to get, but you can still play the build without it. It has a transversal skill that allows you to basically teleport through walls. It has a lot of flexibility and suffixes that you can apply health, resistances, endurance. It has really high cast speed. You can easily get over 5,000 ward while playing this build, and it's just a really good overall cycle starter. Some of the cons to playing this, though, are it has very little damage mitigation. Basically, your main source of defense is your ward. It requires over 300 mana in order to get full usage of the idols. It needs a lot of mana regeneration, and it requires Spell Leech in order to leech back the life that you lose from casting skills while you have Twisted Heart applied. Okay, first let's talk about the Mage Tree setup. So you can either get Scholar or Arcanist. The benefits of getting Scholar is this build does use a lot of health because the more health you have, the more ward you get when you're using Twisted Heart. Also, mana, you need at least 300 mana in order to benefit from some of the stats on your gear and from your idols. So Scholar is a pretty good choice. Alternatively, Arcanist will give you a lot of int and some resistances, which you don't need to get on your gear. The reason why Intelligence is pretty good is because on the Sorcerer board, we have Calculated Destruction, which gives us a percentage of our intelligence added as critical strike chance. So having a lot of int is also beneficial for our crit chance. You need at least 10 points here. So you get 8 here, 1 here, and then you get 1 here. And then you can move on to this. 15% cast speed. This build works really well off of cast speed. The more you're casting, the more you're basically giving yourself more ward. Because every time you cast, you lose some health, and that health gets turned into ward. So more cast speed is good. Up here, you're going to get Warden for more ward retention. We're going to be getting so much ward, we're going to have to like retain it some way. So this build has like over 400 or like over 450 ward retention in it. Also down here, we pick up some more critical strike chance and crit multiplier. This is a great node to get here. This will definitely help us scale our crit build. Next, let's talk about the Runemaster board. Unsealed mana basically just gives us flat mana and cast speed. Two things that are great for this build. At 5 points, whenever you directly use 3 skills in a row, which we're going to be casting a lot, so we're definitely going to be doing that. We're going to get a burst of mana and ward. And this has a 3-second cooldown, but this definitely helps with more mana. Down here, more health and less damage taken from shocked enemies. Pretty much everything's going to be getting shocked because this is a lightning build. So this is just a free 8% less damage taken and some extra health. We move over here, we get Arcane Focus. This isn't a great substitute for Twisted Heart if you don't have it yet, because Twisted Heart is kind of a hard item to get, but this will do something. This will give you at least a little bit of ward, maybe like a few hundred, to help you while you're doing echoes. Mental Catalyst, Intelligence with a Catalyst plus 6. Yeah, we should be using a Catalyst, so that's just 6 Intelligence. And bonus damage from crits with a Catalyst minus 48%. Inscribed Instruments. Critical strike multiplier with a wand plus 72%. And now for the Sorcerer board, we're going to start with Arcane Momentum, which is a buff that grants increased cast speed. At 5 stacks, you can get 25% cast speed, which is really good for this build because we're going to be attacking really fast and taking advantage of the health gain we get from Twisted Heart. Essence of Celerity increases the duration of each stack and also gives spell damage per stack 16%. And while we're at full stacks of momentum, we gain 10% increased movement speed. The next really big node you want to get here is Calculated Destruction, which gives us flat int. It also gives us 3% critical strike chance per intelligence. So let's say you have 50 intelligence on your gear. This turns into 150% increased crit chance. Calculated Destruction is a very good node for any crit build. Down here, we need to get some points here to continue moving on in the board. So we're going to get a couple, and I don't even want to pronounce this. Farther on, we get Rift Bolt. Rift Bolt is amazing because it gives us lightning penetration, which you can't really get anywhere else except the Amulet. So lightning penetration 15%, also lightning damage leech 1.5%. Leech is very, very important for this build. Every time we cast a skill, we're going to be losing like 10 to 12% of our HP, and we're going to need to leech it back up to full, so our next skill can then leech more HP. So leech is very important for any Twisted Heart build. Crackling Precision, just increased crit strike chance, 80%, amazing. Arcane Obliteration, critical strike multiplier, amazing. These two nodes are just pure damage nodes. We move up here, Arcane Insight. You gain 5% or 5 int, and you also gain 25% chance to gain insight on hit. What insight does is it grants you a buff that gives you 20% increased lightning or increased elemental damage and 20% ward retention. We're going to need some ward retention for this build because we're going to have a lot of ward. This build has like anywhere between 5 to 10,000 ward when we're attacking bosses. So we need a lot of ward retention to keep it from falling off quickly. Next, we're going to move on to Spell Slinger, which is just 5 spell damage and mana regen. Mana regen is very important because this build is very mana intensive, and spell damage is just always good for any spell build. And then down here in a corner, we get Archmage, which gives us more spell damage, and this value is tripled if you have over 200 maximum mana. This build calls for like 300 mana because of the idols. A lot of the idols give us double the effect if we have over 300 mana. So we should definitely have at least over 200, which gives us basically 15 spell damage because the number is going to be tripled. So use 15 spell damage from here, and then there's 5 spell damage from here, which is 20 spell damage, which is a lot of damage. And these 2 crit nodes is a lot of damage. So these 4 will definitely spike your build up in damage. So the first skill we're going to start with is Lightning Blast. The important part about Lightning Blast is getting to this node over here called Convergence. The reason why Convergence is so good is because it can act as a single target attack skill rather than having the Lightning Blast chain around and hit a multiple amount of targets. You want to go down this route and get Storm Razor, which will increase the base critical strike chance of Lightning Blast, which is really huge considering we're scaling this off of crit chance and crit multiplier. So this increases the base amount of crit chance. Down here you need to get at least 2 points into Chain Lightning, and then you get Convergence, which what Convergence does is it makes all of your Lightning Blast chains hit one target. It rounds it up, so you have to make sure that when you do get Chain Lightning, you get like an odd number. So you don't really need to get 4, but 3 is where you get the maximum bonus from. So 3 hits, it's going to turn into 2 chains. And then if you go up here, you can get Arcing Power, and you can get another 4 chains, which count as 2 more hits. So you get 2 hits from here, 2 hits from here. You end up hitting this guy 5 times with Convergence. Alternatively, you want to go up here as well and get Overcharge, which adds a lot of crit multiplier, and it doubles the cast chance. Well, it doubles the amount of cast you do, and it has a 24% chance, and you go right over here and you get quadruple cast chance by 25%. So now, instead of hitting the target like 4 times, you're going to hit the target like 8 times. It's like a monstrous amount of times you're going to be single target attacking an enemy. And then up here, you want to get front loaded, which massively increases your damage. But you deal less damage per bonus chain. So perhaps if you don't want to get a lot of chain attacks, you can take 2 points off of here and go over here and get more cast speed. But either way is fine. It still does a massive amount of damage even with front loaded. Next up, we're going to be getting Flame Ward, which is a very defensive skill for mages. We're going to be heading over to Frostguard to get a bonus of 1000 armor. We're going to need this 1000 armor because the mage class doesn't really get a whole lot of armor in most of its builds. So if we can get this, that would be very great for our defensive capabilities. We want to go down this way so we get more increased duration. So Flame Ward will last a lot longer. We're going to go over here and get more ward gained and less hit damage, 40%, which makes us even more tanky, and elemental damage taken minus 30%. So we're taking less hit damage, less elemental damage, and we have a lot more armor. The Flame Ward is lasting a little bit longer with increased duration here. So this is a pretty decent setup to get for pretty much any mage class. Next up, we're going to get the skill Static. Static is really great for this build because it basically just becomes a passive skill that does damage to enemies around you. We're going to head over here and get Overload, which basically makes Static zap nearby enemies while you have over 80 charges. And then we're going to go a little bit farther and get Unlimited Power, which changes the zap attack into a Lightning Blast attack, which does a lot more damage. Alternatively, we're going to go up here and we're going to get High Voltage, which increases our movement charge rate by 28%. So we're going to be getting a lot of static charges while we're moving. And we're even going to go up here and get Storm Chaser, which doubles that amount. So every time we move, we're going to be getting a lot of charges. Overcharge for an extra 100 charges. So we can get up to 200 charges using this. And then if we do decide to expel it, we can get Haste on Discharge for a couple seconds. Or, well, for 4 seconds, which is pretty nice. Overall, this is a really good skill to get just because if you don't want to cast it for the haste, you can just run around and just blast people with Lightning Blast without even having to cast anything. So it's a great passive skill to pick up overall. For our fourth skill, we're going to be getting Focus, which is really good for regenerating mana. But what we're going to do with Focus is turn it into a traversal skill by picking up the Conveyance node. What this does is it basically allows you to use this as a teleport. Not just a teleport though, but a teleport that can go to any location as long as it's accessible, which means when you're farming Julra, you can just teleport through walls and you don't have to change between past and present to go around them, which is pretty neat. You also want to go up here and get Everward for some more ward retention because we're going to have a lot of ward on this build, and the more ward retention we have while we're sitting there AFK channeling mana, we can just increase or we can hold on to our ward so it doesn't degenerate. Down here, Iron Stance, more armor. The more intelligence we have, the more armor we get as well. So this is really good for our defensive capabilities. Over here, we get some haste after channeling. This works well with like static, so we can static, run away, cast Flame Ward, use focus to teleport away. Like we have all these escape mechanics that we can take advantage of. Revelation for more ward burst after we channel it for 1 second. Down here we can get some HP regen, but we're not really into this. We're into this right here, Prismatic Stance, more less elemental damage taken, more defensive stat. Up here we get more mana regen, and up here we get even more mana regen per missing mana. So once we get down to 0 mana, we can cast Focus and basically zip right back up to full, or we can just use Focus to teleport around. Either way, it's great. And our last skill is going to be Ball Lightning. Just kidding, it's Static Orb. We're going to be using this to clear our echoes very quickly. It's a lot of AoE damage. And instead of it being cast outwards in a straight line and exploding, it's going to circle around us while we're moving. We accomplish this by picking up Orbital Fulmination. This allows up to 5 static orbs to basically surround you while you're running and deal massive amounts of damage to everything. So we're going to start by going over here and get Orbital Fulmination. We have to go through Shocking Conduit and Insidious Focus. And then after that, we go down here and we pick up Open Circuit, and then we get Scatter Blast. What Scatter Blast does is it's basically the same thing as Orbital Fulmination, except it spawns like smaller orbs. So you basically make big orbs, and then behind the big orbs are small orbs. So you basically create a tornado of lightning. After you pick up all these nodes, you probably want to go down here and get Arcane Current, which will increase the amount of static charges you gain. These 2 nodes aren't really required for the build, but it does help you pick up more static charges from this skill right here. But where you get a lot of your damage from this is down here into Storm Burst, which increases your damage by 30% multiplier, and increases your AoE by 30%. And then you also want to go down here and get Critical Trajectory, which increases your crit multiplier by 100%. These two nodes are going to give you a lot of damage. But the most important thing from Static Orb is this node right here, which gives you Lightning Aegis for 2 seconds with 1 point, 4 seconds with 2 points. You don't really need it for anything more than 4 seconds. That's way more than enough. But what Lightning Aegis does is it grants you 50% increase lightning damage and 25% less damage taken. That is a huge buff to have, and you're going to be casting lightning or static orb all the time, so you're pretty much always going to have lightning aegis up. Another reason why you want to have lightning aegis is because our idols are going to give you a lot of damage if you have lightning aegis active. So this is kind of like a requirement for this build to work. Well, it's a requirement for this build to do a massive amount of damage. So definitely pick up Static Armor, Storm Blast, and Critical Trajectory. If you don't want to go over here and get these two nodes because you don't really care too much about static, you can go from Forking Surge over here to Volatile Outburst, and it will increase your damage by quite a bit as well. Alright, let's talk about the actual gear that you should be looking for in this build. So first off, wands. All this gear has tier 7 mods on it. That's just to indicate that that's like the important mod that you want on the stat. It's like the #1 stat. Obviously, you're not going to have tier 7 mods on all your gear. That would be insane. But if you could, that would be, you'd have a really strong build. So for your wand, the base, you can go for this one for mana, the Crystal Wand. It gives you a lot of mana. It also gives spell damage and spell mana cost, which is great. But alternatively, you can go for a Dragonhorn Wand, which increases your cast speed by up to 12%. And the stats you want to get, the important stats are not the suffixes, which are chance to blind on hit and chance to slow on hit. In fact, you can just not even have those two stats. The most important stat for sure is cast speed and crit multiplier. Alternatively, you can get crit chance in place of crit multiplier, but you should definitely be getting cast speed on your wand. Next up, we're going to be talking about the chest. Good implicits for the chest: Arcane Regalia, increased mana regen, and increased mana percent. Really, really good. A lot of armor. This is going to help you get up to 300 mana. If you have a lot of mana already and you need to get something else, you can get crit strike multiplier on a celestial arraignment. You could also get critical strike avoidance on a mystic plate. These are all really good options. The stats you want to get on the chest are increased spell critical strike chance. This effect is doubled if you have 300 or more mana. Obviously not a tier 7, although if you could, that would be great. So this basically becomes, instead of like 150, it becomes 300% increased crit strike chance, which, this is a crit build, so the more crit chance and the more crit multiplier you have, the more damage you're going to do. So this is like probably the best node. Next best node would probably be Lightning Critical Strike Multiplier. Again, just for pure damage. And the suffixes, health is great, but you could also get any of the resistances. Pretty much the suffixes on all this gear is going to be free stats for you to just play around with and get whatever you need to get. This build really requires you to have a lot of the prefixes set to cast speed and crit strike and crit multiplier. Next, we'll move on to the Helm. The Helm base is increased mana. It's an Arcane Visage and increased cooldown recovery. You could probably get Celestial Helm, increases your critical strike chance by 72%. And a Mystic Helm, critical strike avoidance, pretty similar to the chest implicits. But again, I'm going with mana here because the build needs 300 and mana is hard to get on your gear, especially mana regen because it counts as a prefix. So the most important mod here is +4 to Static Orb. This mod, you do kind of need to get it like tier 6 or tier 7. The reason for that is the last mods you're going to get or the last levels in Static Orb are going to be like those really big critical damage nodes that add like 25%. So the more levels you have in Static Orb, the more damage you're doing. So this is really strong, not just because of the increased spell damage, but because of those +4 levels of Static Orb. So that's definitely an item or a mod you should be looking for on Helms. Lightning critical strike multiplier, yeah, it's more damage. Poison resist, increased health, flat health, necrotic resist, elemental resist, void resist. Those are all things you can be looking for. These are just the two placeholders I put on for this helm. Amulet, really, really good base is the Bone Amulet. It gives physical and necrotic resist. Two hard resistances to get. You could also get a gold amulet, which gives you a lot of fire and lightning. But you can get elemental resist on your gear, which gives you all cold fire. It gives you cold, fire, and lightning all at once. So fire and lightning by itself is not as important as physical and necrotic and poison and void. Alternatively, you could get increased critical strike chance on a silver amulet, which is just more damage, but you won't really be needing it because this build does a lot of damage already. Some important stats are Lightning Pen. This is probably the only other place other than on that skill tree where you can get Lightning Pen. So you should get it here if you can. Critical Strike Multiplier for more damage. And again, the suffixes, they are what they are. Catalysts for the mage. You want to get Crystal Skull. This is pretty much the most important thing you can get on the catalyst. The stats don't matter. The base of a Crystal Skull is what's important. The reason why this is so important is because of the 6% spell critical strike chance. What this does is it doubles your critical strike chance. Most skills in this game start with a base crit chance of 5. What this does is it increases it to 10. Well, technically up to 11. Also, ward retention and 16 intelligence is also very good. I'm not even going to show you any other implicits because this is the best one. Increase cast speed if you can get it. Critical strike multiplier. And then again, elemental resistances and void resistances and all those other resistances you can get. The belt. Belt is a very great spot, or a very fascinating spot, because there's no good prefixes to get on the belt. The prefixes are actually kind of garbage. So here you have a great example of how you can get some of your mana regen. You can get it by getting it on the belt. You don't need to get the increased lightning damage because increased lightning damage isn't very important for this build because you have way too much of it already. So you could even get something else there in the prefix instead of lightning damage. And the suffixes, here is a good chance for you to get a hybrid health roll. You can only get hybrid health roll on a couple pieces of gear. I think the gloves, the boots, the belt. So if you can get it here, that would be great. Next, we'll move on to the ring. Some good implicits for the ring are Ruby Ring for fire resist, Opal Ring for cooldown recovery, Ivor Ring for necrotic resistance. Up here you have elemental resistance, mana regen and flat mana, critical strike chance on a copper ring. So there's a lot of different rings you can get with good implicits. I decided to go for mana again because of that 300 mana requirement. And again, you can get critical strike chance for the prefix. You can get increased mana regen because you need some mana regen in order to spam cast your skills. Then there's health, there's elemental resist, there's void resist, there's all those resistances. Same with this side over here. There's int for the prefix, you can get that as well. Necrotic resist on the implicit, and ward retention as well is great. Down here on the boots, boots are very simple because there's not a whole lot of mods that can roll on boots. I think unanimously everybody agrees that getting increased movement speed is probably the best stat on boots. Other than that, hybrid health rolls, so you can get the percent and flat rolls, and just get some int because this is an int build. There's not a lot of prefixes, so int is pretty much the best thing you can get here. So movement speed, int, hybrid health, and flat health. Boots are easy to make. Gloves are a little bit harder. The implicits for gloves, there's two good bases here. There's Crusader Gauntlets, which give you Void Resist, which is a great spot for you to pick up your Void Resistance, and Solar Embracers. which is a lot of increased critical strike chance. If you don't already have like 10 million critical strike chance, I guess you can get these, but you definitely don't need to. And also noble gloves for cast speed. Again, you should have a lot of cast speed in this build, but if you don't have enough, get some more right here. Some stats you want to get on here is, hey, guess what? Cast speed and critical strike chance. And again, the hybrid health rolls or resistances. And the last spot we're going to talk about is Twisted Heart. This is a Twisted Heart build. If you don't have Twisted Heart, well, you're kind of in trouble because this is going to give you anywhere between like 5 to 10,000 ward as you're running through your echoes. You're going to be casting your skills like crazy. You don't have to have the increased cast speed roll on here. That's just, if you can, that should like be something you should aim for, is cast speed. But obviously most people, if they're playing this type of build, they're just going to have a normal Twisted Heart, which is already amazing. But yeah, more cast speed is great. Next up, we're going to talk about the idols. And for the idols, you want to get as much lightning damage as possible. This is a great spot for you to get a lot of lightning damage on your gear. This is why I've been saying that 300 mana is what we're aiming for, because if you have 300 mana, the bottom line of text here is doubled. Increased lightning damage, this effect is doubled if you have 300. So that's great. And then the 66% increased lightning damage while you have Lightning Aegis. You get Lightning Aegis from the static orb tree. You get down here to static armor and it gives you Lightning Aegis for 4 seconds. It's a really good buff on its own, but it's even better now that it will also be scaling lightning damage from your idols. So you can get 4 of these, place them like so, and then you can get some single nodes here that give some health, some mana, some resistances, some health regen if you need it. And that's how the idols are set up. As far as the blessings go, these are the only 5 blessings that have an effect on the strength of your character. These 5 blessings are just loot blessings, like they give you better catalysts, better wands, better chests, better armor, things like that. Of the blessings, the most important one is the Grand Hunger of the Void. You kind of require this for the build because every time you cast a skill, when you have Twisted Heart equipped, you're going to be losing a percentage of your health. So if you don't have a way to leech back that health very quickly, you're going to find yourself at like a half of your health, HP, and then every time you cast, you're going to be regenerating less of it as a ward. So you always want to have full health when you cast a skill, so you gain the most amount of ward possible. Next, you want to probably get some critical strike avoidance. This will definitely help you, not get crit so often. Over here, this is the second most important blessing to get, a chance to shred lightning resistance on hit. This build is all lightning all lightning damage. So if you can shred lightning resistance on hit, that's great. That's more damage. Down here you have physical resistance. There aren't many other things in here to get. I mean, you can get cold, but you should already have cold from your build. I guess you can get increased armor, but this build isn't really stacking too much armor other than when you cast focus or when you use flame ward. Those are the only 2 times you get a giant burst of armor. So I would probably just recommend you get physical resist, then you don't have to worry about getting physical resist on your gear as much. And then down here, a chance to apply frailty on hit. Frailty is a pretty good debuff. Armor while channeling is also a pretty good node to get because you will be channeling focus from time to time. Or you can just increase your flat armor right here by 320. There's actually quite a few nodes you can get in here. I decided to go with frailty on hit, so you take 18% less damage. Alright, so that's the build. Basically how it functions is you take advantage of Twisted Heart, you attack really quickly, and you turn your health into ward, and you retain that ward with ward retention. I had a lot of fun playing this build, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it too. Thanks for watching.